Hello and welcome. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can create a dynamic chart in a Power App. So you can see I have the controls for a Power App bar chart. I can change the chart width. I can change the height. I can change the font type, font size, the data color, the border thickness, the border style, the border color, the grid style, the label angle, just here, the items gap, which is the space in between the bars, the legend, have it displayed or not, the legend size, I could change the chart title, I can change the font size of the chart title, I can change the text color of the chart title, and I can make it underlined or not. And I can remove the markers, which are the data elements on the chart. So if you'd like to know how to create a dynamic chart, stay tuned. So I'm going to go to a blank Power App. Let's call it dynamic chart. I already have one called dynamic chart. Call it dynamic bar chart. Hit create. So to create a bar chart, I'm going to go to Insert, Charts, Column Chart. Here's our column chart. Let's move it down some. If you click the chart, you'll see the properties of the chart that you can manipulate. The first thing you want to do is go to the items property, items. So you have column chart sample. We want to change that so it looks at our SharePoint list, which is called population. So population contains a state column and a number of employees and a city column. So we'll replace this with population. I need to connect my SharePoint list to the Power App. Just grab the URL. Population list. Let me remove this. Change this to population. So it's looking at the city column. Let's make it the state column. So we have our chart connected to our SharePoint list. We're going to start adding our controls. So the first control we're going to add is for the chart width. So I'm going to create a drop down. What we want to do is when we create our controls, we want to rename our controls. So I'm going to call this control oops. I'll call this control chart width drop down. And in the items property of this control, I'm going to use the sequence function. So the sequence function has two parameters. The first parameter is how many numbers are going to be in the list, which is 300. And then what's our starting point? Our starting point is 1300. Let me create a label. Call this chart width. Now we need to select our chart. We said that this control is called chart width drop down. So select our chart. And in the width property of the chart, we're going to refer to the chart width dropdown. Let's test it. Let's change it from 1300 to 1454. See, it changes the width of the chart. We can do the same thing for the chart height. I'll just copy this. Change the label to chart height. In the items property here, change the sequence so it starts at 400 with 100 numbers. Starts at 400 to 499. I'm going to rename our control to chart height dropdown. Select the chart. Go to the height property. Now if we change our height from 400 $4.99. Let's move this legend. Over here. Next we want is the font type. So create another drop down. Let's copy the label. Items property. Got a list of font types. Rename our drop down to font type drop down. We'll select our chart. Go to the font property and refer to our font type drop down. So right now it's Arial. Change it to Arial Black, Courier, Comic Sans. Next one is the font size. font size. Rename the control. Call it font size drop down. In the items property, the control. Change it to 20 and 10. Select the chart. Go to size. Refer to the font size dropdown. So the font size can be changed from 10 to 14 or whatever number we choose in our dropdown. Next one is data color. Copy this. Rename the control. Call it data color dropdown. In the items property of the control, I have colors inserted in here. And in the color property of the chart, we're going to do a switch statement this time. Looking at the different choices in our list. So right now, the data color is red. We can change it to green, or orange, dark magenta. Next one is border thickness. So I'm just going to copy this. Border thickness. Rename the control. Call it border dropdown. Change the items property. To sequence. Select the chart. And in the border thickness property, refer to the border dropdown. So now we have a border thickness of 1. We can change it to, let's say, 5, and it changes the border thickness. Next is border style. So I'm going to copy this control. In the items property of this control, I have different border styles: solid, dotted, dash, and no border. Let's rename the control to border style dropdown. Then we're going to select the chart. Go to the border style property and refer to our border style dropdown. Then we have a solid border style. We can change it to dotted or dash or no border. Next one is the border color. So let's copy this. We're going to have the same border or same colors that we use for our data color for our border color. Call the drop down border color drop down. And again, we have our items already listed. So select our chart. Going to use a switch statement again. We go to the border color property. Add our switch statement. It's looking at the border color dropdown. Border color dropdown. So right now, the border color is red. We can change it to any one of these colors. Next on our list is the grid style. So I'm going to select these controls, copy them, paste them. It's grid style. Rename the control. Go to the items property of the control. We have all, X only, Y only, and none for our grid style. In the property of the chart, we're going to go to grid style. And we're going to use a switch statement again. Looking at the grid style drop down. So we have all, X, Y, none. So let's change it back to all. Next on our list is the X label angle, which is the angle of these labels here at the bottom of our X. So I'm going to copy this control. Call this X label angle. Rename the dropdown. Call it X label angle dropdown. In the items property, we're going to use a sequence again. So we're going to start at 0. We have numbers ranging from 0 to 360. Select our chart. And in the properties of the chart, we're going to go to X label angle. Refer to the X label angle dropdown. So right now we're at 1. This is 0. That's what 90 looks like. 220. Just go back and set it back at 0. Next on the list is the items gap. So the items gap is the space in between each bar. So I'm going to copy this, paste. Items gap. Change the items. Oops. Change the items to a sequence. So we're going to start at 0. From 0 to 20 for our items gap. Need to rename the drop down. Select the chart. In the items property of the chart, or in the items gap property, refer to the item gap size dropdown. So right now we have a set to 1. This is 0. Change it to 5. It spaces out the bars on the chart. Next on the list is display legend. So right now we have it turned on. It's the legend right here. Let me select this. Say display legend. Items property of the drop down. We say yes or no for legend. We name the drop down to legend display drop down. This time we're going to select the legend, not the chart, the legend. And then the visible property of the legend, we're going to use a switch statement. Looking at the legend display dropdown. So right now we have a legend. Because we have it set to yes. If I change it to no, it should disappear, and it does. Next on the list is the legend size. So I'm going to copy, paste, legend size. And the items property of the drop down. We're going to use sequence again. Starting from 1 to 15. Let's rename the drop down. And we're going to call it legend size drop down. I'm going to select the legend and go to the size property of the legend. And have it refer to the legend size dropdown. So right now the legend size is 1. Change it to, let's say, 9. That's how it looks at 9. Let's say, what does it look at? 12. It's 8. So let's go back to 12. That looks good. Next on the list is the chart title text, which is right here. Chart title text. So select this. Chart title text. Actually, this is going to be, instead of a drop down, it's going to be a text input. Take the default out of there. Going to rename the control, the text box, to chart title text. And in the properties of the chart title, we're going to refer to the text box, which is chart title text. So we can start typing our title. Notice that it appears, we start typing in our text box. There we have our title. Next on the list is the chart title font size. So we can use this, copy and paste. Let's move this chart down some. So this is going to be our chart title font size. So I'm going to rename the drop down. In the items property, this control, we're going to use sequence again. Starting at font size of 10. Ranging from 10 to 20. I'm going to select the title of the chart and go to size and refer to the chart title font size. Right now it's at 10. Something happened here. Oh. Should be chart title font size drop down dot selector dot value. So we have 15. Change it to 12 or 16. Let's go back to, let's say 14. Next on the list is a chart title text color. So we use the same colors that we did for here. This is going to be chart title, font size, chart title, color. Going to rename the label or the control. to chart title text color dropdown. Select the title, the chart. You go to the color property and use a switch statement again. Looking at the chart title text color drop down. So right now the chart title text color is red. You can change it to orange or magenta or green. Let's leave it at magenta. Next on the list is the markers. Actually, let's do the chart title underline first. So chart title underline. Copy this. Chart title underline. Rename the dropdown. Items property of the drop down will be yes or no. Let's yes or no. Select our chart title. Go to underline property. Create a switch statement. Looking at the chart title underline dropdown. So right now there's an underline. You can say no if we don't want one. So let's remove the underline. Next on our list is the markers. So the markers are the values of each bar on the chart. So we can turn it on or off. Copy this. Markers. Rename the dropdown to markers display dropdown. I'm going to select our chart. In the markers property of the chart, I'm going to use a switch statement again. Looking at the markers display dropdown. So right now we have the markers turned on. We can turn them off and it'll hide the data. Let's turn it back on. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to update the current data. Before I do that, let me clean this up a little bit so we have some room. Let's change the background. I'm going to insert a rectangle. Let's put it like right here. Create a label. Update data. I'm going to create a drop down. In the items property drop down, and change this to a SharePoint list, population. It's going to look at the state column. Create another label. Say, select the state. enter the quantity. We need a text box for the quantity. Get rid of the default value. So we're going to call this drop down state drop down. We're going to call the text box quantity text box. Now I need to create a button. Let's call it update. So what we're going to do is we want to change the value of the employees. So I'm going to select the update button. I'm going to go to the on select property. I'm using the update if property or the update if formula. It's looking at the population SharePoint list. It's matching the state column to the state dropdown. And it's going to update the number of employees in the number employees column in our SharePoint list. So right now, Arizona has 50 employees. We can change it from 50 to, let's say, 75. We press update. It should update our chart. And it does. Now Arizona has 75 employees. We can change another state. Let's say Florida, from 43 to 61. And it changes the number of employees for Florida. I want to thank you for joining. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you in the next video.